Stephanie.
Thank you. I'm running because Albertans deserve better. We deserve better, I deserve better, you deserve better than this corrupt PC government that we've had for the past 43 years. This government has given us promises time and time again, has said we've changed, we're different, we're under new management time and time again. This is nothing new, and we need a change. We need a progressive voice. Calgary Elbow in particular, at this particular time, at this particular moment in history, needs a strong advocate. They don't need the same old thing that they got from Alison Redford. Now, that being said, the NDP can provide that progressive voice. The NDP is the only party, the NDP is the only group in this province that is growing, that is strong, that has the team and the resources to be able to advocate for your interests. Now, with regards to my views on recent events, without further clarification on that, I'm going to assume there's reference to the scandals that have plagued this government. And I think that transparency is the only way that we're going to be able to move ahead and gain the trust of voters in this province. And that's something that the PC government simply cannot provide. It's something that only the NDP is in a position to be able to provide voters. We have a strong record of being advocates for this province, for the people of this province. We will hold legislature till 4 a.m. if we need to, and we will get results.
Susan.
Thank you. So the first question was, why am I running? I'm running because I am gravely concerned about the state of healthcare and education in this province. I'm running because I also feel that the riding of Calgary Elbow deserves better than a parachuted-in candidate. And I'm running because I have worked for 26 years in the oil and natural gas industry, and I've made a good career there, and I felt it was time now for me to give back to my community and give back to this province. And with respect to the give back part, this comes back to the second question that the gentleman raised, which was what's your view of the recent events? The recent events are no surprise. This government has been in place for 43 years. Over time, when you are in a situation and you lard yourself up with more and more people who take more and more advantage of more of your taxpayer dollars, they lose the ability to see that they're actually crossing the line. The culture of entitlement is a culture. They're living in that culture, and they can't see their way through that. So that's why it's now time for a change. And it's time for a Liberal voice to come forward to say, you know, we're not just looking at the new leader who's put the party under new management. Let's not forget, this new leader was described in the Financial Post as a friend to industry. We're looking for a government that has people in it who are friends to the people and who are friends to the environment. In addition to being a friend to industry, we can find a balance here between the economic side of the equation and the social and environmental side. But this government doesn't seem to understand how to get there. And at the last minute, what we see are last-ditch efforts to throw $2 billion into schools and we're waiting for the next announcement next week to see what we're going to do to miraculously save the healthcare system. That's just not good enough. So I'm running because I want to be a strong advocate for you. I want to be someone who can work collaboratively with the different levels of government, and I want to make a difference here. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
I'm running because as an entrepreneur, I started my own company because I didn't see a company out there that was doing it right, that fit my values, and I thought, you know what? I can do it better. I'm gonna get after it, and I'm gonna do it myself. And we grew that company from startup to 40 people inside 5 years, and it was a great experience. In politics, I woke up one too many mornings, read the newspaper at the kitchen table, and pounded my fist on the table, and eventually Jess said, you know, you should really do something about that. And I don't think she quite had this in mind, but here I am. I did not see that any of the existing parties, and with respect to my friends here at the table, have had many chances to make that difference, have many chances to make that impact coming from the opposition. We don't need a better opposition in Alberta. We need a better government in Alberta. As someone born and raised in Calgary Elbow, I will stand up for the community. I have a track record of doing that. I've done it before. As your full-time MLA, my first and only job will be to stand up for the people of Calgary Elbow. This allows me also to finish off one of the most important points of the flood discussion I didn't quite get finished earlier. Told you I'd get it in. But the floodway buyout program is so deeply flawed. Once we have mitigation in place, significant upstream flood mitigation in place, we must redo the flood risk maps, identify what is no longer in the floodway based on the new mitigated realities, and resell those properties back into the market to recoup some of the taxpayer dollars wasted on buyouts, but also to put our communities back together again. That's very important. Alberta is a great place to live. I've said that before, and I think we all agree that it is a great place to live. But Alberta also doesn't put up with good enough is good enough. After 43 years of PC rule, that's what we have. We have a government committed to creating a crisis, making some announcements that they're going to solve the crisis, and expecting our praise and thanks in yet another vote. It's time in this by-election to send a message. The message is we're tired of that, but the bigger message is we want something better. We want a better government that better reflects our communities by electing people who are of that community and from here. In terms of recent events, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to ask the question about marriage equality. I can tell you that I believe in same-sex marriage. I can tell you that I believe in repealing Bill 44, or Section 11.1 now it's called in the Human Rights Code. Very specific actions. I believe in supporting gay-straight alliances. These are very specific things that I believe in, that the Alberta Party would pursue and are much better, I think, than a general discussion of respect and dignity for people. I'd like to hear all candidates' opinions on that particular topic. I think it's something that's important to know and understand in Calgary Elbow. It's certainly consistent with what my personal values are and what the values of the Alberta Party are. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, why am I running? I'm running because I have an ethos of being an officer and a gentleman, and that was drilled into us in our profession as a military officer. That meant being ethical, being accountable. And when I saw what was happening at the provincial government under the leadership, past leadership, it was time to stand up. I had the opportunity now in my life to do that. It's time to do my civic duty and stand up and make the government accountable. We need honest, ethical people. So everybody who fulfills that requirement should come forward and actually run and replace this government that has had this whole list of scandals. Now, I liken the ship of state that we have here in the province. We have a ship that's going forward, but it's taken hits. It's leaking. And right now I'm seeing Mr. Prentice taking the playbook of the wild rose and stuffing the holes in the ships while it's taking on water. The problem is that he's brought on some new executive, but he hasn't changed the crew. He's got a mutinous crew. And so that's not going to change anything. That ship's still going to sail forward and it's going to eventually flounder. What we need is a whole new crew and a whole new captain. That's why I'm running. What do I think about the past? Well, I think I've just explained all of that. It's extremely important that we have a powerful, strong MLA who will, this is a by-election, this is not a general election, that we elect someone who will stand up and hold the government accountable for all these tragedies that have happened. just keep their feet to the fire. It's been working. We have an effective opposition for probably the first time in 43 years, and let's just keep that opposition growing and holding the government accountable. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. For our third super question, our 3-minute question, Steve Chapman.
Thank you. So we have heard each of you outline why you are seeking elected office, and you have addressed part of the disaster of 2013 for the Alberta floods, both for this area and across Alberta. Now, if elected, what other issues do you feel are needed to be addressed in the area of public policy, government services, and quality of life for all Albertans? We'll start with Stephanie and then move around.
Thank you. For me, one of the biggest issues that I think needs to be dealt with and addressed is the issue of the underfunding of legal aid in this province. Now, thank you. Legal aid is so severely underfunded that, as I mentioned previously, somebody who is earning $1,300 on AISH cannot get legal counsel. Now, when you're faced with a criminal charge, or if you're dealing with a family law issue, you're in the midst of a divorce or a custody battle and you're fighting for your children, and you can't get a lawyer, I don't exactly know how this province expects you to be able to properly represent yourself in court. You know, I see legal counsel with years of training doing their best, and to go up against one of them as a self-represented individual, whether you're a doctor or an engineer, it's a lofty goal that is impossible for the average person to reach. Now, the Minister of Justice has pointed the finger to the federal government and really unloaded the responsibility. But the administration of justice is a provincial responsibility, and it's the responsibility of the Minister of Justice to ensure that we have a properly funded legal aid system. And now, when we don't have a properly funded legal aid system, the whole system grinds to a halt. And the result is people who should have been perhaps convicted of a crime go free. Now, I've been doing work pro bono in order to help people try and get legal counsel who otherwise have been denied by legal aid. The issue is rampant, and it really seeps into the community. Now, the other issues that are particularly important to me is healthcare. I mean, the healthcare in this province is in dire straits. I saw my father stay for a long period of time in the hospital, and the care that he received, while impeccable, it's difficult for healthcare workers in these overcrowded hospitals to be able to give the proper care and attention that is needed to each of these individuals. There's an issue with long-term healthcare beds. You know, palliative care is an important issue, and people are being sent home, and their loved ones are being made to take care of them, and they're not qualified to do so, and they shouldn't have to. Those, for me, are the two main issues on the top of my mind today. Thank you.
Focus on, in addition to the things we've just talked about, actually start with rebuilding trust. We have so little trust in our government institutions as a result of 43 years of PC reign that we have a lot of work ahead of us to rebuild that trust. The first way to do that is to make things truly transparent. The Premier had come out with an announcement recently saying that he was going to have a review of the 194 agencies, boards, and commissions, that we didn't even know there were that many around, but they're floating around out there, that are managing our money, and they're managing about 2/3 of all of our tax dollars. And as soon as I started looking at that, I thought, well, it's not enough just to tell us who the CEOs of these tribunals are and what it is they're supposed to be doing. I need to understand how they got there. I need to understand whether they're spending our money effectively, and I want to know whether they're getting results. One of the biggest agencies we're talking about is Alberta Health Services. It spends $18 billion. We barely know how they spend their money. And the element of transparency that we could get by understanding that in more detail and having a more broken out budget so that someone would know what does this $80 million actually go towards. So I'd be looking for transparency on all of the government agencies, boards, tribunals, and whatnot, in addition to the transparency that we have and we should have into our own government as well, all those different departments and ministries. We need to see what they're up to, and we need to see it much more clearly than we do now. So for that, I think would help rebuild trust, because people will then have to do the right thing because they know we're going to be looking at it online, and we'll find out what they're up to. The other thing I'd work towards is rebuilding respect. This government does not respect the professionals that it is governing. The Alberta Health Services organization is trying desperately to make the health services work. The doctors that I've talked to, the former administrators like Ralph Coombs, who ran the Foothills Hospital, all of these people have incredibly good ideas on how to clean up and make the system more effective. They're not being consulted. Dr. Paul Parks can't even get a meeting with the new unelected health minister. This is not enough when we are in such a deep hole and we're trying to bring back our healthcare system to make it a world-class system as befits the richest province in our country. So I'm looking for rebuilding respect with the healthcare professionals, rebuilding respect with the nurses, rebuilding respect with the teachers. Now, let's not forget that under the PC government, the teachers found themselves actually almost ready to file violations of privacy lawsuits because the minister decided he could just start emailing them at home. Like there's a sense that they can't even bring forward issues because they're going to be punished. So rebuild trust, rebuild respect, and also the last one, rebuild respect for the environment. I have to leave it there.
Royalty revenue, because we can't get access to market for our core product, for the oil that we produce. And I think that is not simply because of bad luck. That's because we have not done a good enough job in Alberta of stewarding our environment. Now, I'll hasten to add, I think Alberta does, in fact, have some very good environmental regulations. I think perhaps there's some areas of improvement there. But what we don't do a good enough job on is enforcing those regulations. I think Alberta needs to focus on addressing, so as an entrepreneur and as a business person, I look at the issues that Alberta faces, not as challenges or things that we need to be afraid of, but as opportunities. The market and the world is telling us, Alberta, we want you to solve the carbon problem for us. We want you to use less, or perhaps no, fresh water in energy production. We want you to address issues of tailings ponds or land use. If Alberta set out a bold objective to help be part of the solution for climate change by significantly reducing carbon emissions from large industrial process like the oil sands, the province of Alberta and the people of Alberta, we have a remarkable group of people here who are very, very entrepreneurial, highly educated. We have some very savvy, bright engineers and technology folks who are already working on these things. What we need is a government that thinks along with them, that encourages and incents and creates true centers of excellence in these areas. And if the government of Alberta took that as an imperative of its own right, what we would find is that we both solve those issues on behalf of the world, we enable continued economic growth through our energy industry, and we diversify our economy into more the knowledge-based economy and not just the resource-based economy. And it also has the nice benefit of getting Alberta off of this resource revenue roller coaster, which we've lived on for so many years. When the price of a barrel of oil is up, we can build schools. When it's down, sorry, we got to take out the library and stuff your kids in there. So I think that is a question of vision that has been completely lacking from this 43-year PC dynasty. The other thing I would add in terms of quality of life is the Alberta Party has a strong belief in the creative industries, in the arts and culture. And if anyone was at my campaign kickoff last Saturday, you'll understand what we mean by that. We had a live band, we had a local artist there, and I invite all of you to stop by any time at the old gas station at the four-way stop in Marda Loop on 34th Avenue and 20th Street. It is, I think, by far the coolest campaign office in the history of Alberta politics. But I think that speaks to who we are. So with that, I'll cede the rest of my time. Thank you.
Well, I want to talk about public policy for quality of life, and I'm just going to talk about two areas. I mean, Mr. Dirks and I qualify for seniors here, so that's one that we have to look at, because right now we have a failed policy for seniors. Wild Rose announced today that they would redirect $200 million in current spending to the following areas: $50 million to reopen closed transition and long-term care beds, another $50 million to expand home care funding, and another $100 million to the front line to cut the wait time for surgeries and other procedures. The fact is that because of my age, I've seen my in-laws and my parents have to try to find a place to stay when they start to suffer. And that just has to end. So Wild Rose is taking an initiative in that particular area today. By doing so, we're going to free up some beds in the hospitals and find proper accommodation for our senior citizens. Dealing with I want to talk about anti-bullying, because we need to change, Mr. Minister, to the Education Act here. My daughter suffered from bullying. It's traumatized her. What we need is legislation now. Thank you. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Gordon.
I was really encouraged to hear of the priorities and the values of my opponents. I agree, I think, with most of what they've said. Environment, trust, respect, transparency, bullying. We had a child who was bullied, and I think we still suffer the consequences of that too. I think that these things are all very important, and there are reasons why I'm running. When I talk to people at the doors, these are the three key things that keep coming up and that I want to focus on. We already talked about one, flood mitigation, so I'm going to talk about three other key ones that come up. This is a riding that has got parents and children all over the place. I meet them at the doors all the time. Guess what the number one thing is that they want to talk about? Education and schools. And some of my opponents may make light of announcements to build schools. But I can tell you that the school trustees and school board chairs that I talked to today, when we told them about the 50 new schools and the 25 modernizations that are going to take place, about the 55 that presently are taking place, and the 70 modernizations that are taking place, and Bowness High School is a really good example. Many of these are already taking place. And back in 2012, when there were announcements for schools, 35 new schools, 31 of those have already been built, and 4 of them are just in the final stages of being opened. It's really important that we focus on public education. That's a top priority of mine. We need to make sure that we have the very highest quality of teachers to sustain our world-class education system, that we are supporting them, that we are dealing with the resources they need for the inclusive classrooms, which they are challenged with these days, and I understand that, having been a teacher myself. The second priority that people talk about is healthcare, and we all get that. I get that. My parents and my wife's parents, they're both gone now. And I know the importance of good care. We actually were blessed, in my case, to receive really good care for both of my parents. And I desperately want that for every senior citizen as they age. That was not the case with my wife. And we saw some really difficult and horrendous things happen, which just ripped our hearts out, troubled us deeply. I don't want to see that happen. I think the number one thing that we need to do in healthcare, there's many things, but my number one priority, and I said it in my opening remarks, is to advocate for long-term care beds. We need a massive Marshall Plan build for long-term care beds in this province, in the same way that we just announced a massive build for new schools. Leadership does that. Leadership doesn't wait. Leadership doesn't talk about it. Leadership takes action, and we need to do that. And the third priority, and I won't spend much time on this one.
We're done.
We're done.
I'll get to it.
In conclusion. Well, folks, we're blessed with some excellent candidates and excellent answers. Now we're going to go from our super 3-minute questions to all of your questions. We're going to ask you to contain your answers to a minute. And by the way, I was a member of City Council a long time ago, and I remember you could ask as many questions as you wanted City Council, but you had a debate in 5 minutes. And then I became an MLA. You could ask as many questions as you wanted, but you could debate for 30 minutes. And you know what I learned? You can say it in 5 minutes if you have to. Well, except now we get to say it in 1 minute. So our panel is going to rotate through the questions. We're going to get to as many as we can. Here we go.
There are some tremendous questions here, but they're quite specific. And so this is getting to the nub of it. And I think it starts with Susan. What's to be done about the backlog of long-term care patients currently in hospital settings? We've heard a couple of comments, but this is quite specific. Thank you.
This is an issue that the Liberals have been looking at and working on for some time, and our policy is very clear, and we've had it certainly well before the PCs had it, and that is that we need to look at building more home care and continuing care facilities. They cost significantly less than an acute care bed, and that means you can move the patients who are in the long-term, or in the people who are sitting in the acute care beds who are not being properly served there can be moved into the long care facilities. Those facilities should be built, and they should be also augmented with continuing care at home, home care workers at home that are properly funded and properly supervised.
I agree. It's the short answer. It's interesting, you hear Minister Dirks talk like someone else caused this problem. The PC government caused this problem. +10 years of allowing an infrastructure deficit to build up. Why do we need a Marshall Plan for long-term care beds? Because the PC government didn't build enough long-term care beds, period. It's simply not good enough. And electing another PC to Calgary Elbow will send the wrong message. Thank you.
Anybody else who wants to respond?
Oh, I'd love to jump in on this one. Of course, schools weren't built. Of course, long-term care beds weren't built the way they should have been built. That's why I'm running. That's why Jim Prentice jumped back into leadership, so that we could do the kind of things that needed to be done. And building those long-term care beds is absolutely critical. So I'm committed to that. Building the schools that need to be built, I'm committed to that. We're already doing that. That's action now. So I'm committed to be that voice for Elbow around the table, around the cabinet table, around the caucus table, in the legislature, in order to address the priorities of Albertans. I wouldn't have come back into public life unless I thought that was an absolute critical priority. That's the kind of government Albertans deserve now. And I believe that's the kind of government that the Jim Prentice cabinet and caucus is delivering now. And we're going to continue to do that for the residents of Elbow.
I'm happy to jump in on this one too. So, we all have experienced the long wait times. Now, the PC solution to this was to have an unelected, overly confident person parachuted into the position of health minister who has absolutely zero background in healthcare. This isn't the way to solve our healthcare problems. They have finally admitted that they will break their election promise to build 5,000 new long-term care spaces in Alberta. And that simply is not good enough. You can't just say, yes, we're committed to creating new long-term care beds when you already said that and broke that promise. So the NDP, we propose 1,500 new long-term care beds to increase the number of family doctors as well to help take some of the pressure off of the emergency and hospitals. We also need to provide incentives for graduates to stay within the province. The NDP is the only progressive choice, and the PCs simply can't do this job.
Well, I'll jump in now. Well, the overall healthcare system is broken, there's no doubt about it. But I just want to repeat what the Wild Rose announced today, that they would redirect at least $100 million, this is dealing with seniors, to the following areas: $50 million to reopen closed transition and long-term care beds, and also $50 million to expand home care funding. So that's just the recent policy that was announced today. And it tells me that it cost taxpayers $1,650 a day to care for a patient in a hospital, and it costs $150 a day to care for someone in long-term care. So it just makes economic sense. Thank you. Well, I thought the question was, are you in favor of pulling funds from special needs schools? Well, I can't believe that anybody would say yes. I mean, absolutely. Why would that be? I mean, that doesn't seem to have any feeling in it at all. So I would say no.
I would agree with my good opponent to the left here, although he's likely not to the left. He's likely over on the right.
I'm in the middle.
Not according to my door knocking. Special needs kids are very special. And every one of them deserves to be treated just like every other child. Anybody who would even contemplate reducing funding in any school, whether public or private, for special needs children is beyond me. We actually need to do a better job of addressing the needs of special needs children in our schools. And you know, I'm not one of those people who's going to say we should reduce funding for a particular sector somewhere. What I am in favor of saying, and nobody's going to say that I'm not an advocate for public education. I've devoted my life to public education and will continue to do that. We need to do the very best we can to support the teachers that we have in our public education classrooms who are dealing with integrated special needs children in those schoolrooms. That is a focus of mine as I become Minister of Education. Inclusivity is critical. I want to focus on that for the kids and for the teachers.
I think it's probably pretty evident where I stand, given that I have a special needs sibling, that there should be more funding and more attention given to special needs students. I know from experience one of the struggles that special needs programs deal with is finding and attracting teachers to those programs. It's a highly specialized area, and there needs to be more encouragement for teachers, new teachers, to go into that area, and there needs to be encouragement for them to stay. We need good people teaching our special needs students and molding them for a future of ultimately independence. As far as private schools go, they're definitely the NDP is definitely in favor of pulling some of that funding, and the reason being is that we need to focus more of our resources on the public education system that is available to all Albertans.
We go back to education. I mean, specifically, one of the questions was, will Elbow Park School ever open? So we'd like to include that in the answer. But we understand from everybody that there's going to be more schools, that there's going to be more money put into education. And I think there's a question from the floor is exactly how is that going to happen? Where is that money coming from? Are we going to expand our debt base to make this happen? Or how do you foresee putting these additional hundreds of millions of dollars or perhaps $1 billion into the process? In 1 minute. And we're starting with actually John.
Did you say Elbow Park School?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just tell you where the money's going to come from. Because we have what I consider to be two dinosaurs here that we built up by the PCs. One is called the Alberta Health Services System. I mean, we have the super board, we have all the decision-making taking place in Edmonton by this huge bureaucracy. I just know from the military that you don't win a war when you have something like that constructed. You have to get the money down to the people who are at the coalface, who are the nurses, who are the doctors, who are the teachers. So what we have to do, once we become the government, we will find efficiencies. Because we don't need all this middle management. We need to redeploy that middle management elsewhere. But there will be money as a result of that. That will fund the requirements for finding the solution to the problems here, dealing with more nurses, more teachers. Will Elbow School ever open? Of course it will. It's absolutely, I have to tell you about Elbow School. If you go down and drive down and see Elbow School, that school was flooded. Wherever you have a flood, there should a school should replace it. And that school is a work of art, and so it's going to be repaired. Thank you.
Absolutely. I just saw the 45-page document on the Elbow Park School, the engineering, the architecture. It's going to be a fabulous school when it's built. It's going to accommodate about 250 students, and the funding is all there to do that through insurance and through the emergency flood money. So I've met with the school board chair and just reiterated for them that it's a go. I got to tell you, my good opponent to the left here is living in a fiscal fairyland, and here's why. To take $200 million, which they've said we're going to build on schools, to build new schools by 2020. And then they're going to build long-term care beds. And then they're going to put more money in to hire doctors. And there's flood mitigation and a number of other things. Add it all up. And he said we're going to find efficiencies. I've been in government and around the horn a number of times, and I've heard that line before. And it ain't true, folks. It ain't true at all. What'll happen is one of two things under this party to my left over here. They will not find the efficiencies necessary, all of the efficiencies, to do what they say they can do. It's just an impossibility. And that's why I use the word fiscal fairyland. Or they say we will do it, but they will cut, and they will cut in order to make it happen. That's not what Albertans want.
Thank you. We all understand the value of a dollar. We know what it means to have cash in our jeans. Now, when it comes to spending it, and when it comes to the government spending our money, the cash in our jeans, we need to be very cognizant of the word responsibility. Now, fiscal responsibility has not been at the top of the PC government's list, and we have all seen that. Now, My friend to the left has a track record of spending money. And spending money to support his own interests. The New Democratic Party has put forward in the last general election a responsible budget and has accounted for where all of the funds are going to come from to pay for it. Now, if we're talking about a fiscal fairyland, we need only look at the PC's previous budget. Thank you.
Well, I was at the press conference today when the education minister and the premier announced the new schools that are being built. And when the questions came forward, which were, where's this money coming from? The answers got very vague very fast. And that's because, actually, what the answers were things like, we're going to have a small subgroup of the cabinet, they're going to be looking at these various issues. The question was pointed to them, and it was basically, is it going to be part of the existing capital budget, or is it in addition to that? There was no answer to that. The answer was more along the lines of, we'll be creative, we're going to be innovative, we're going to work with our partners to find a different way to do this. That is all mumbo-jumbo. That means I have no idea. So in my view, I think what the PC government is counting on is another uptick or a continued uptick in oil royalties. And as we have said and seen many times here, they go up and down like this, and our programs go up and down with them. So I would be very skeptical of the responses we've been hearing from my friend way over there about where the money's coming from. Because frankly, I think that they don't have it, and I think that our party has done a budget which actually does explain where we can capture waste, where we can capture streamlining, and where we can capture more funding to help meet our needs.
So to answer the first half of the question, absolutely yes, Elbow Park School must be rebuilt exactly where it is. It's a cornerstone of the community. It is a beautiful piece of architecture. And my only shortcoming in life was not actually having gone to Elbow Park School when I was younger. We have been left with a crisis in infrastructure. We have an incredible infrastructure deficit in this province, and it is going to cost money and take time to dig out of it. We are going to need to borrow money to do that. No one here has talked about specifically where the money is going to come from. I'm going to be brave enough to talk about where the money is going to come from. We do need to borrow some money to do that. We also, I think, need to look at our taxation system. We need to look at our flat tax. Currently, people who make less money in Alberta pay the same rate of tax as people who make a lot of money in Alberta. I think that's fundamentally unfair. I think people who make less money in the province ought to pay a lower rate of income tax. And I think if we stagger the income tax system to align it with the same way the federal system works, what we're going to find is that we not only make the system more fair, we also generate a significant amount more revenue, which stabilizes the resource revenue roller coaster and allows us to pay for schools. The question was, how are we going to pay for it? I've just given you the answer.
This next question is starting with Gord. What would be your strategy to improve access to market for Alberta resources?
That's a challenging question. Clearly, that's one that's on the Premier's mind. And I think market access was the first thing that he talked about at the very beginning of his leadership race and his premiership. We all know that our province is profoundly dependent on market access for our resources. And if we're not going to secure that, then we're not going to be able to do any of the things that we've talked about tonight. We won't be able to build schools. We won't be able to build long-term care beds like we would like to. We won't be able to invest in health care. We need to have a robust, healthy energy sector, and that means market access. So that means a few things in terms of how that comes about. And our Premier has talked about working in cooperation with the federal government, working in cooperation with the Aboriginal community, and that's one of his great strengths. He understands the Aboriginal community. He was in charge of that file in the federal government. He has many contacts in that area. and his negotiating skills with the Aboriginal community are well known through the land claims that he was responsible for negotiating over a number of years. So market access is going to require working effectively with the federal government, with the Aboriginal community. It's also going to require working effectively with overseas international agencies and governments. And we need a leader for our province who understands that and who can effectively operate in that domain. And that's one of the reasons why when Premier Prentice came to me and asked me if I would join the team and help renew government, I felt confident in saying yes, because I believe he's the person to lead our province to provide that kind of market access.
That ringing is the time, and we're counting on all of the candidates respecting the agreement that we had that would take a minute to answer these. Next candidate, please.
I'm assuming that's me. Just thank everyone actually for that that guideline there. Actually, that's really helpful. All of our time is extremely valuable, and we need to all respect each other's time and resources. On the issue of access to market resources, I think this is sort of pointing at one of the main issues that we're facing, and that is pipelines. It's getting our resources from Alberta down to Montana so that the bitumen can be refined. Well, that's the PC plan. Our plan is to refine our bitumen at home. That's going to create jobs, it's going to keep the money here, and it's going to ensure that we can actually experience that Alberta advantage. It would mean lower gas prices at the pump, and at the end of the day, more cash in your jeans.
So coming from the energy sector, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I think the answer lies in a number of different places. The first place is that there is a level of unease and distrust on the part of the public when it comes to the regulators who are actually making these decisions. They feel that the regulators are too closely aligned with the government, who is too closely aligned with industry. So we need to actually bring back into the legislation the right to come forward and defend the public interest, because the things that we're seeing developed actually are things that impact all of us. Secondly, I do agree with my friend over here that we need to do more upgrading here in the province, because that will not only bring added value to us, but it will also take away some of the concern people have about shipping raw bitumen out over the waters or down to the U.S. And thirdly, I think what we need to do is actually have decent environmental regulations and decent oversight instead of just talking about it, but we actually need to deliver that. You'll remember that the Auditor General did a report, and he said that the oil sands monitoring program was not world-class, it was incompetent, it was inaccurate, and it was wrong. That breaks trust. Let's just do it right.
So when we're losing $3 billion a year in revenue from not getting market access, obviously it's a huge issue for the province of Alberta. Jim Prentice can't just simply wave his magic wand and make pipelines appear. It doesn't happen that way. And I think we do need to ask ourselves, why are we here? I've talked earlier about Alberta's environmental record. Now, I actually think that Alberta in many ways gets a bad rap, but this is not a problem that simple marketing alone is going to solve. I think we need to not only do the right thing, we need to be seen to do the right thing. It's that classic ethical test. And I think that is the challenge that Alberta faces. I think if we set out to solve some of those environmental challenges, we can do that here in Alberta. We have the people, we have the brain power, we have the innovation to be able to do those things. In terms of the value add question, I'd like to see Alberta get the maximum return on the energy assets that we all own here as citizens. Whether that's upgrading or whether that's shipping raw bitumen, my worry is we don't have a job shortage in Alberta, we have a skilled labor shortage. If we are artificially incent upgrading, I think there's a risk that we end up actually making it worse, and we in fact return less money to taxpayers than if we pursue a pipeline strategy.
Okay, we're going to talk about pipelines. The production level, we have sufficient capacity right now just using rails because we're being blocked right now. So we got enough capacity with production coming online for 3 more years. In 3 more years, we're going to have a problem. We have to have some pipelines. There are 3 pipelines. We got Northern Gateway, we got XL Keystone, and we have Energy East. Right now, the best project to get things moving is Energy East. We're just going to take that gas pipeline and convert it to oil, and we got 1.1 million barrels a day being shipped down to Montreal. Now we got to build over to the Irving port with their refinery. That opens up the European market for us. This is a solution made in Canada. As a matter of fact, it's even shorter to go to India from New Brunswick than it is from, say, Vancouver. So that's something within our control. We don't have to worry about the United States. We don't have to really worry. It's right here in Canada. So that's what we ought to do, and the XL will fall immediately after that. We got to do it right away. Thank you.
Ryan, it's 9:10. Are we
We
continuing?
have time for one more of these questions, and then we'll the summation.
What is your position on the modification of civil servants' pension plans to closer approximate those available in the private section? And I believe that's Stephanie.
Thank you. The NDP actually spent a lot of time in legislature keeping the PC government, those who stayed up late at night, in order to filibuster and try and prevent the pension bills that they were trying to ram down our throats from going forward. Overall, we have been successful. Those 2 pension bills were struck down. The NDP is in favor of ensuring that seniors can plan for their retirement, and that generally we can all plan for our retirement. I mean, it's something that even I need to consider, particularly if we're going to do if we're going to do the type of pension where it's not a defined benefit but defined contribution pension. Then we really do have to start saving our pennies and scrimping. Seniors need to be able to count on our government for support.
So the Liberals were part of the group of opposition members, and I think they were all staying up really, really late to try and work their way through the filibuster here. The government's effort to undermine the public pension plans was almost unconscionable in the way they rammed it through the legislature without any real consultation with the people it would impact. So I would be strongly opposed, as were the Liberals at the time, to monkeying with that and destroying the future of people who had counted on their pensions, their public pensions, and would suddenly find themselves being stripped of that. So my position there would be just, it's there, it's something people are counting on, and we can't be taking it away from people willy-nilly, because we're looking for money to trying to find money where we can't find it somewhere else.
My answer is I think a deal is a deal. I think that the other part of any question about public finance or pensions is we have to ask ourselves what problem we're trying to solve. Through this whole debate and discussion, the government was unwilling to provide true numbers and access to the data so we can have an independent actuarial analysis. That's very hard to say at 10 past 9 at night after a long debate. So we as citizens could make an assessment. So the people whose pensions are looking to be changed could actually make an honest assessment as to whether or not, in fact, these changes are required. Do we have a significant unfunded pension liability? Will we, in fact, be able to recoup that over a certain period, over a relatively short period of time? It felt to me very much like a manufactured crisis for political reasons, which is something we see all too often from our PC government.
To me, a deal is a deal. If we have promised the people who are public servants that they're going to have a pension, then that's sacrosanct. That's sacrosanct for those people who are serving in the public service right now. Now, if new employees are coming on, then that's a different matter, and that has to be negotiated with the union. Thank you.
Unfunded pension liabilities are a huge issue across North America for most governments. They're not the kind of thing that can be solved quickly overnight. They require thoughtful, long-term, conceptual planning and negotiation with people, but I am not one of those people who is in favor of pension plans being modified. My father was a federal civil servant. As his child and as his son, I wouldn't have wanted his pension to have been modified. End of story.
All righty. Folks, we've had not all the questions that we wanted to ask, but we've got a great job uncovering them. It's time for closing 3-minute remarks. Just for everybody's edification, because we trust everyone will respect the time restraints. Sandra will stand at 2 minutes and 30 seconds holding the yellow card. She will sit at 2 minutes and 45 seconds. When she stands holding the red, we're done. So we're going to go in reverse order to the way we started. Are we fair or what? So our first closing comment will come from the Liberal Party candidate, Susan Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the one thing I heard from the residents in Calgary Elbow, in addition to the things we've just talked about, is a desire to change the way we do politics. People are tired of the shrill name-calling style of politics that they've been seeing lately. They want to see civil conversations, they want to see reasonable debates in the legislature, and they want to see this in this campaign as well. And they're right in this because civility is a sign of respect. Respect for the voter and respect for the democratic process. So I intend to adhere to that principle throughout this entire campaign and quite frankly as I go forward. So I'd just like to touch now on the issues we've covered as we've gone through this evening. If you care about healthcare and you're worried about a healthcare system that is on the verge of collapse, and if you think that the richest province in the country should be able to provide the best healthcare in the country, and if you're worried that your child is not receiving the proper attention in school, or if you're struggling to pay ever-increasing costs of post-secondary education, or if you're worried about your frail and elderly relatives who are parked in acute care hospitals because there aren't enough long-term care beds or sufficient support to care for them at home, or if you recognize that energy drives our economy, but our ability to get our products to market is hampered because of the lack of an independent environmental monitoring agency or regulations that are inadequately enforced, or if you've been let down by the disaster relief program that not only failed to address the needs of flood victims, but didn't go nearly far enough to ensure that the personal and economic devastation that we experienced in the 2013 flood never happens again, and if you're wondering why it's okay to sell a public park to a private developer and not one of your public representatives is prepared to hear you out or let alone help you, and if you're a progressive voter who is seeking strong local representation that can be effective in the legislature now, not in the next election or the one after that, but now, then I would ask you to ask yourself, do these issues resonate with you? Because if they do, I would ask you to vote for me. As I said, I'm Susan Wright, and I'm running for the Alberta Liberal Party. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the New Democrats, Stephanie McLean.
Thank you. What I'm hearing at the door is that people are embarrassed that they bought into a bill of goods from Alison Redford and the PC government. We all thought it was going to be change, and unfortunately, once again, the PCs proved us wrong. I'm hearing that people are looking for a progressive alternative. Now, with the greatest of respect to my friend, John Fletcher, that is not the extreme wild rose. My friends at this table will tell you what you want to hear in order to get elected, regardless of whether or not that is their party platform and their party policy. When you're looking for a progressive alternative, you need to look at the party's track record. The NDP has a strong track record of standing up for people and advocating. And with the greatest of respect to my friend, Susan, The Liberal Party in this province is not growing, but rather is a dying party. The Alberta Party, with the greatest of respect to my friend on the right, I personally find it difficult to determine what their policy or platform is. The NDP party is the only progressive alternative that is growing in this province, that has a strong track record of advocacy, and that has proven they can stand up for your rights and advocate on your behalf.
Thank you. On behalf of Wild Rose Party, John Fletcher.
I've never been called an extremist before, so that's very interesting. This election is not a general election. This is a by-election. This is an opportunity to send a message here. You people have a vote. You can send a message to the PC government. Please do so. We have to strengthen the opposition. We work very well with the other people in the opposition, the other parties. I want to continue doing that. I want to strengthen the opposition. Please vote for me. Thank you.
The Alberta Party, Greg Clark.
Thank you. I want to thank, first off, the Calgary Leadership Forum again for this opportunity. Thank my fellow candidates for your standing up for democracy. Thank all of you, especially those of you who stuck around through the debate. I've certainly learned a lot through this process, and it's been it has been a remarkable evening. I'm hearing at the doors that the people of Calgary Elbow do not feel that after all that's gone on, the PC party has earned their vote this time around, if, frankly, they had it in the first place. They don't feel like the Wild Rose Party really fits their values. And they don't see that after 90 years of opposition, the Alberta Liberals have a chance to ever really form government in this province. I think it's safe to say if the Alberta Liberals were going to form government, they would have done it by now. With respect to Stephanie, and I very much admire your perspective and what you've shared with us here tonight, I think the New Democrats aren't viable to win here in Calgary Elbow. What that leaves us with then is a desire for new energy in the Alberta legislature, a party that truly represents our values and reflects who we are as a community in Calgary Elbow. Someone who's from our community, someone who's born and raised here, someone who's raising his children here as I was raised here, someone whose family has deep roots and connections and understands what it means to be a part of the community, someone who experienced the greatest natural disaster in Canadian history on a first-hand basis. I've stood up for our community. I have a track record of doing that. My entrepreneurial values, I think, are a good fit and a good connection with the spirit that has made Alberta such a great place to be. I have a great and deep appreciation for what it is to live in this community. I feel incredibly fortunate. So, John, we do need to send a message. We need to send a message that we want something better, something moderate, something fiscally responsible, a party that is fiscally responsible and socially moderate and connected to our communities. That's who I am. That's who the Alberta Party is. And on October 27th, I ask for your vote. Thank you.
And Progressive Conservatives, Gordon Dirks.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to my colleagues at the table here, my opponents and fellow people concerned about democracy for your good input. I benefited from your answers and I thank you for them. And thank you to the Calgary Leadership Forum as well. I think that people who run to be an MLA ought to make a pledge. I've always made a pledge in the elections that I've been involved in. And I tell people at the doors, this is my pledge to you, to be accessible to you, to listen to you, to take your concerns to heart, and to act in your best interests on the matters that are important to you. And that is my pledge to the people of Calgary Elbow. And what have they said in response to the things that we have done? The first people I met with virtually out of the gate after I was appointed was people with the Calgary Flood Action Group and MMA and that leadership group. And and said, I need to hear and understand exactly what you think should be done. And I'm very pleased that that group has said, yes, the flood mitigation efforts of the Prentice government that they've taken so far are in the right step. It's not the only thing that needs to be done, but it's a right step in the right direction. I've also pledged to people that I will work hard to invest in public education. Nothing is more important than investing in the future generation, as we have been doing in recent days. To invest in healthcare. I said earlier that building long-term care beds must be a #1 priority of government, and I'm telling people in Elbow and at the doors, that is a #1 commitment of mine to advocate for that. So those are the kinds of things that I'm pledging. It would be an honor to be the representative for Calgary Elbow, and I thank you for listening.
Well, folks, on your behalf, I'd like to acknowledge the volunteers who made this evening possible, and to begin with Dolores Pilso and Sandra Miller at the front. Our ushers, Rob and Steve and Marika and Bruce. I especially want to acknowledge our photographer, Henry Janak, who videos and takes us and posts the photos on our 2 websites. I want to acknowledge our question panel. Thank you very much, Tony and Steve and Bob, so much for what you've done. I want to acknowledge our Vice President in charge of fundraising, Elaine, for putting the bite on you, and especially our timer, Sandra. Above all, ladies and gentlemen, a special round of applause to the man who organized this event, James Maxim. James, thank you so much. I have a presentation to make to all the candidates. Quick little background. 2 years ago, the Alberta government brought out a report on family satisfaction with the nursing home systems in Alberta. And so a few months after, I earned my living, by the way, as an expert on patient satisfaction for hospitals and nursing homes. So I emailed the executive director of the Health Quality Council of Alberta, and I said, I'd like to talk to you and ask you some questions about the report. I got an email back that said, if you want to talk to me, you got to give a list of questions. So I emailed a list of questions, and I did not get an answer. And I waited 6 months, I waited 12 months, I waited 14 months. 3 months ago, I wrote another email. I said, you didn't answer my first question. I have some questions about that report now that's just about 2 years old. I got an email back that said, if you want to ask us questions, you have to send us an email with a list of questions. And by the way, could you give us a copy of that report you want us to answer questions about? Now, I'm serious about this. So part of the Calgary Leadership Forum stands for transparency, it stands for accountability, and it stands for customer service. 15 years ago, I wrote a book called Satisfaction Guarantee, How to Satisfy Every Customer Every Time. And one of you is going to be the next MLA. Now, I'm going to make an observation that this community would be well served with any one of you getting elected. But just to take out insurance, I'm going to present each of you with a copy of my book.
Thank you very much. Did you sign it?
Oh, did you get your time?
Just 250 people to do all the work and make a difference. And by my count, that's exactly the number of people that are here tonight. So it's all in your hands. We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.